So this is a little funny one. Please hang in there as I take a look at this with you. The most widely used mutation rate for non-coding human mitochondrial DNA, aren't you glad I started on this, relies on estimates of the date when humans and chimpanzees shared a common ancestor. Can we close those doors? Thank you, Pastor. But a few studies, thought to be 5 million years ago, but a few studies have begun to suggest the actual rates are much faster. Evolutionists are most concerned about the effect of the faster mutation rate. Researchers have calculated that mitochondrial Eve lived 100 to 200,000 years ago. Using the new clock, she'd only be 6,000 years old. No one thinks that's the case. Okay, you guys have clearly had too much to eat at lunch. So here's the point. When they went without any assumptions ahead of time, just went with the data, and they were calculating mitochondrial DNA, they found out that it came out to Eve being 6,000 years ago. And it's like, whoops, that sounds biblical. Let's back off and do this again. So anyway, that's kind of fun. Here we go. Age issues. Oh my goodness, let's talk about age issues. Okay, James Ussher thought that God started creating the world on Sunday, October 29 at 4004 BC. And incidentally, there was others in his contemporaries that thought, yeah, probably about 9 o'clock in the morning. So, real precise. Whereas you had James Hudson come along and say, you know, the earth has only been altered by currently observable processes, not a flood. And it began to go into this idea that the earth was much, much older. We find no vestige of a beginning, no prospect of an end. Now think of what that meant, saying that in the 1700s. That's a real challenge to Christianity, right? So what happened? In England, they're looking at mountains like this, and they're saying, how in the world can that only be 4,500 years old? Look at how round it is. Surely it must be much older, right? So you had people like Charles Lyell, wrote Principles of Geology. Imagine the Earth to be maybe 1, maybe 2 million years old. That's a lot of numbers. You had a guy come along, Baron Kelvin, William Thomson, imagine 20 to 40 million years. But he couldn't think it would be older than that because it'd be too cold. Well, then you had Ernest Rutherford come along and say, no, there's decay in radioactivity decay, and that'll keep the world warmer. It's older than Thomson said. So what is the currently accepted age of the Earth? What? Yeah, thank you. Widely accepted. I wish it were widely accepted. Anybody know? Oh, it came up. Okay. 4.5 billion years, give or take a few million. All right? Excuse me. What is the Bible for evolutionists? Again, it's the geologic column, the layers of rocks, and they assume, you can see that column, you see the thin lines of going upward, the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, Cenozoic, those are the eras, and that have to do with life. Early life, middle life, recent life. And then you have it broken down into various periods, like Cambrian, Precambrian. You can see some of those are named after layers in England. But here's where some of the major events were, if you believe in millions of years. And there's extinctions along the way. So dinosaurs extinct at the end of the Cretaceous. Why do they think that? Because there's none buried above that layer. Wouldn't it be nice to know how old a rock is? Wouldn't it be nice, they all came stamped, age stamped. Where's that one? Oh, come on, you don't know this one? Plymouth Rock, yeah, Plymouth Rock. Somebody went to the trouble of marking it with the date on it, 1620. Okay, three basic types of rock. You remember this? Sedimentary. But the only datable rock is an igneous rock. Why? Because a sedimentary rock is made up of thousands and thousands of little tiny pieces of other rock. So you're going to get different dates if you could date them at all. So what do you want? You want a rock that was liquid once, melted, and then it became hard. And at the time that it became hard, technically the clock starts because it can no longer lose some parts of it, which would have been in gas and other things. So, aren't you glad you've come to learn about radiometric dating? All right, thank you. But there's some enthusiasm. There's assumptions about it working. And these are the three assumptions. The decay rates have to be constant. You have to know what you start with. And you have to know that whatever you have not been chemically stuff snuck in or snuck out. So this took me a long time to make. So please show proper respect. This is time going from left to right. Do you remember half-lives from school? Half-life? Okay, this is a half-life picture. Now, at the far left, that's when you have a brand new rock. It's all mother rock. There's no daughter in it. But immediately, some of it's going to break down into daughter. I don't know, do you like that image of mother breaking down into daughter? Anyway, so how long it takes for half of it to become a daughter, mixed with the parent still, that is a half-life. How long that took. Does that make sense? No? Yes? Yes? No? So you got to chemically isolate. You got something that's just a certain mineral, and it starts to break down. Incidentally, in case you haven't noticed, we all live in a universe that's decaying. I see some young people here that don't have a clue what I'm talking about. I see some other people who know very well what I'm talking about. We are all decaying. So that's a second half-life. There's a third half-life, fourth half-life, and so forth. You're down to 1/16 of mom left, and it's 15/16 of daughter. That's what a half-life is. Now, I won't go into this, except this is a gripey person that is talking about, oh well, gives dates that are older than biblical chronologies. Okay, here we go. Carbon-14 is used to date for thousands of years, not millions of years. When you hear carbon-14 dating, it is strictly used on things that once were alive. That's plants, that's animals. Organic material. That's all it's used for. For rocks that are millions of years old, you got to use a different system. So carbon-14, what's carbon-14? How do they use it to interpret dates? And here it is, and this is a work of art. A nitrogen atom comes through. No, a neutron comes and smacks a nitrogen atom, knocks a bit of it off, and it becomes carbon-14 in the atmosphere. This is riveting so far. Then carbon-14, which is heavy carbon, goes into the plants in the form of carbon dioxide, goes into the plants, and the plants have carbon-14 mixed with a carbon-12, which is a normal carbon. And those plants get nibbled on by little critters, cute little critters. And they're chewing on the leaves, and they get carbon-14 into their bodies. And then, unfortunately, a point comes, whoops, when they no longer eat anything, which is another way of saying they die. And that means no more carbon-14 is getting in them. And whatever they have left of carbon-14 drops those two extra electrons and becomes a nitrogen-14 again. So that is what happens. Wasn't that beautifully done? That was beautifully done. And now it's as clear as mud, isn't it? I mean, clear as crystal. You now know carbon-14 got into animals and plants that way, by being made in the atmosphere, and eventually it's got a half-life of 5,700 years, 5700. And that means that it's good for maybe 50,000 years, and absolutely not longer, because the amount would be so tiny, tiny, tiny. So you're going to make a mistake. So we don't even believe in 50,000 years, so don't think I just said I believe in it. I don't. But carbon-14 can only be used for so much time. And it is dependent upon the atmosphere being essentially unchanged. Now, let me tell you, the flood changed the atmosphere. with the amount of carbon and everything else being deeply changed. So carbon-14, I frankly think, now that the atmosphere is semi-stable in its manufacturing it proper, I kind of think carbon-14 is probably good for 1,000 or 2,000 years. I think there's probably some reliability. But the closer you get to the flood, the more it's going to be off track, and it's not going to be reliable at all. Oh, I'm so glad that I just figured that out. Incidentally, volcanoes eject lots of carbon-12 into the atmosphere, and that can give false readings. If you've got lots of volcanoes, for instance, Krakatoa, have you heard of Krakatoa? In Indonesia in the mid-1800s, late 1800s, biggest volcano we've had in centuries, blew off, changed the weather patterns in the world for a full year. And scientists will admit any carbon-14 dating you do around Krakatoa is going to be off. So anyway, so here is a gripey, complainy lab worker for carbon-14. This guy has had a bad day because listen to him. The troubles of the radiocarbon dating method are undeniably deep and serious. It should be no surprise then that fully half of the dates are rejected. The wonder is surely that the remaining half come to be accepted. There are gross discrepancies, the chronology is uneven and relative, and the accepted dates are actually selected dates. This guy sounds like he's had a bad day. He's had a bad day, but he works in the world of carbon-14 dating, and he has questions about how the dates are used. So, and I do not want to overstate this because there's a lot of very serious scientists who try to do the very best they can with the data they've got. So I'm not disparaging the whole group, but here's something that is not infrequent. Let's say they find something, let's say it's a Native American something or other, and they're trying to establish a date of when these Native Americans were local. And so they got some organic material and they're going to date it. And they might get 3 dates. And they might look at those 3 different dates that they get from those samples and they say which one works best with what we were thinking coming in. And it's not unusual for them to select carbon-14 shows this date. Are you with me on this? So that's a bit of a problem in that world. And, you know, the actual dates are actually selected dates. That's what he's saying there. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the greatest story. Here it is. Some of you looked at this and no one asked me what it was. I got to tell you what this is. I did something once that every blooded American male wants to do once in their life. I got to play in lava. Am I right, guys? Yes, 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 okay, and some other people too. I got to play in lava. Let me tell you the story. I went to Hawaii, so ladies, went to Hawaii, the Big Island, on our anniversary. Points? Okay, points. Went to the Big Island, and at the time, like they'd been doing for years, the volcano was active. So drove over to the place where old lava had covered the road and blocked it, parked there, got out, went over to a little ranger kiosk. And there was a woman ranger inside, and I went up to ask her this question. This shows you where my brain was. Excuse me, would it be all right for me to walk up to where the lava is coming out? What did I expect?
No.
No, hit the road, buddy. You know, this is what she said, and I'm not kidding. She said, why, sure. Just be careful. It's right up there. Do you see? You see where that false mirage is, that kind of steamy? That's where it's coming out. Just be careful. Thank you. Whoa. So anyway, hey, that worked pretty good, didn't it? So anyway, so off I go. I pick up a long stick while I'm walking, and it's up and over these old lava flows, up and over for, I don't know, a mile or two. Finally got up to the place where it was coming. There it was oozing out of the side of the mountain. And have you heard that lava is hot?
Yes.
I mean, it is. Yeah, it's hot. So I bought this little cup the day before thinking, I'll just get up to there and just kind of scoop a little bit out like that. That's what I'll do. When I could not get anywhere near. I mean, I totally get the Daniel and his friends, the fiery furnace story. I totally get that now. So what could I do? I'm thinking about this, and I'm looking at this. There's another guy there. I'm grateful because he took a picture, proved I was there. But anyway, so I said, okay, I put this metal cup on a rock. I had my long stick. And so I'm hot, hot, hot. Put my stick in the lava to try to get some to stick to the stick. Okay? And so, caught on fire, dropped. Caught on fire, dropped. Caught on fire, oh, there's some, yep, okay. Boom, 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 boom. Dropped my stick, had my water bottle, poured it on there, and there is my illegally collected piece of lava from a national park. Now, cool, right? Totally hot, right? Incidentally, there was a place there where there was a crack in the rock and you could see lava flowing down toward the ocean. Just this red river going down there. It's pretty cool. And yes, my tennis shoes were very warm. But anyway, so what did I do all that for? Besides just total fun. One of these days, I'm going to break off a piece of this and send it to a lab and ask them to date it for me because I was there the day that this rock was born. And I want to see what date I get from it. So it costs a few $100s, but I am going to do it someday. My problem is they're pretty smart on this kind of stuff. Where'd you get this piece? Well, Hawaii. How old do you think it is? The last thing they want to do is be embarrassed. So I get that. But anyway, that is cool. So lava is potassium-argon. What is it? Potassium goes to argon. Argon's a gas. So here's the thing. Potassium is breaking down into argon, but when it breaks into argon, argon is a gas, and if it's liquid, it can bubble out. It's out. It's gone. All right? But when it becomes a solid rock, the argon is collected inside and stays inside. That's the thinking. So however much you've got in there still of argon is how long that rock has been solid. That's the thinking. Looks good on paper. Does it really work? Well, and incidentally, people say, Stan, doesn't it say somewhere in the Bible where the earth was without form and void, and then God created? So was there a rock here before he started 6,000 years ago? And I'll have to tell you that the Hebrew is vague enough to where maybe, but doesn't help anything. Because we're not talking about the original rock, the bedrock of the earth. We're talking about lava flows that flow in between the fossil records, like in the Grand Canyon or anywhere where there's fossil records. When there's like this layer could date, I don't know, let's say 30 million years, and that one's 20 and that one's 10. Those are the things that we got to deal with. Are you with me? Okay, so it's not the bedrock. So if the world was without form and void for 4.5 billion years before God started doing something with it, maybe, but it doesn't help us. So here's some radiometric dating. Let's try it out and see how it works. This is a very famous example from the Uinkaret Plateau into Grand Canyon. Here are 4 different methods of dating that they dated this lava flow that came down the side of the Grand Canyon. The top one is potassium-argon, then it's rubidium-strontium, and then rubidium-strontium isomers, and lead-lead isomer. Look at the different dates, and MY means millions of years. Okay? So potassium-argon is anywhere from 0.01, that's 10,000 years, to 17 million years. There's a space, 10,000 to 17 million. And then you've got billions of years for these other methods. They're using all these methods should be roughly about the same in dating the rock, and they're getting crazy numbers. All right, and just for the fun of it, they found this bit of lava down below everything, and they thought they would date it. And it came out that they usually had younger dates than the rock on top. That's kind of funny. Anyway, so there's some problems here. Here's some dating irregularities. And all of these cases where they're showing these different places where lava was measured were places where they had historical records as to when that flow happened. Okay, let's see what kind of dates they get. When did the flow happen? Those years? Look at the measurements that came back on those years. So can you see we got problems? So it really does look good on paper, but in terms of actually trying it, it seems like there's problems. All right, so for instance, you have other anomalies like limestone, that's supposedly Jurassic limestone, has a carbonized tree stump in it that carbon dates to 20 to 28,000 years old. How can that be? In other words, this is a stump that got covered with limestone back 189 million years ago, and then they date the carbon stuff, and it's much, much younger. How can that be? Issues for dating the Earth. Living fossils. Oh, you heard about the coelacanth? Anybody heard about the coelacanth? A very interesting story. In 1938, the British Museum was exhibiting the fossil of a coelacanth, 400 million years old, showed on display. And boy, what they really liked about the coelacanth was it had fins that looked like, right there, take a look, fins that sure look like that, with a little imagination, someday, those would be legs, right? Walk out on the ground, right? So they love coelacanth. Here's the thing. That same year, they found a live one off the coast of South Africa. This is a woman that was a museum director, and she heard about this being found by the fishermen. She zipped down there to try to get it, and she got there in time to get the outside of it, but they'd already cleaned the inside out. But anyway, she took pictures of it, and there's no question, it's a coelacanth. And since then, they've been finding lots of coelacanths because, among other things, they said to the fishermen, you find one of these, we will pay you for it. So they've been finding them. And they've actually done videos of them. And they have a video of a coelacanth on the lot of swimming, and you know what it does with those lower fins? It swims with them.
That's so obvious.
In other words, they don't hop on the ground or do something looking like legs or anything else. They swim. I just thought that would be interesting to point out. I knew you were thinking that I was going to say something else. Horseshoe crabs. You ever seen a horseshoe crab? These are the funniest looking things. You ever been to like Massachusetts and see these? They are ugly. Except maybe to their mother. I don't know. But look at them. When you take a look at them, they are found exactly preserved 400 million years ago, right? Right down to every bump, every leg, everything is just identical to them. You know, it's amazing. Oh, I've got that fossil. These fossils are up here. Middle Jurassic fossils from Solnhofen. You take a look. Middle Jurassic means 150 million years old. Do you see any evolution in these things going on? They sure look like they do today. And don't tell me that shrimp looked like the one you had on your plate. Okay. No. Okay, so this is an interesting story. Wollemi National Park. This is a story about a handsome young ranger that worked for this Australian national park, and he told his supervisor, I'm going to go check out this canyon over here. You got to lower yourself by a rope, but I'm just going to go explore it and give you a report. Okay, go. So off he went. And Dave Noble. And Dave went, and when he got down to the bottom of this canyon and looked around, he found a tree that he'd never seen before. In fact, a small grove of trees. He wondered what they were. He brought pictures back and samples of pine cones. And turned out that he discovered something that thought to be extinct. And not extinct for a while, but 200 years ago, 200 million years ago, extinct. The Wollemi pine. And yes, I used to own one of these Wollemi pines. It is the rarest tree in nature, but I think there's like less than 100 in the national park where it was found. But it's prolific in making pine cones. So they are growing them from pine cone seeds and selling them to try to raise money to preserve the rest of the originals. And so that's interesting. And for a while there, pre-COVID, they were actually exporting them. Now they're not anymore. Anyway, I told you about the footprints. Let's skip that. Issues for dating the Earth. Missing rock, unconformity. This is a very famous place at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Right there, there is 1 billion years missing. If you've seen it, would you please report it? 1 billion years missing from one layer to another. And what's interesting is it's smooth as a pancake between the two. And those are called nonconformities. Miracles of preservation. Let's take a look. Okay, I told you about the T-Rex bone, but did I tell you that all these other dinosaurs or early fossils, they have been finding proteins from? And you can see a long list there. And that list is growing. And they never thought about looking seriously for organic materials on fossils. And now they are. There's a natural gas pipeline, a fairly new one. Look at how fast rock can grow. They have found out since early days, and they've tried all these, coal, petrification, stalactites, opal, oil, all of these things can be, if the conditions are right, made rapidly, where it used to be the thought was only long age can make these things. So that is interesting. If you've ever been to Mammoth Hot Springs in Yellowstone, okay, some of you, it's a great place to go. If you just watch the hot springs there long enough, you will see rock growing before your eyes. And that's calcium carbonate. Why is that interesting? Because calcium carbonate is what makes these things. And when you go to Carlsbad Caverns, and you see these beautiful stalactites hanging down, and one of them might have a little drop of water go boop, boop. I'll do another. Boop. The ranger there will say with great certainty, that stalactite took 100,000 years to build. And they would be correct if it was always going boop. But the thing is, calcium carbonate, if the water is hot and the water is saturated, can grow while you watch. I mean, here is a piece of stalactite that I have that clearly had a very rapid internal part made, down to that first big arrow edge, and then 2 later growths. But that first middle one that made about 80% of it was rapid. You could see it. It wasn't a little boop, boop thing. It was shoot, coming down fast, like the Mammoth Hot Springs. So the point is, they always think the rates stay the same. That's the problem. Here's a funny one. About the Carlsbad Caverns, this is great. Look at this. From 1924 to 1988, there was a visitor sign above the entrance to Carlsbad Caverns that said Carlsbad was at least 260 million years old. 1988, the sign was changed to read 7 to 10 million years old. Then for a little while, the sign read it was 2 million years old. Now the sign is gone. And who was that? It's a cave specialist that works with the Forest Service, so he knows what he's talking about. That's kind of interesting. So, uniformitarianism. Okay, let's use uniformitarianism back at them. There's a lot of things that if you use current rates can't work out very well. There's not enough sediment in the ocean for the ocean to be millions of years old. Not enough salt. Carbon-14 is in the wrong places. They found carbon-14 in diamonds. You cannot explain that one. The erosion of continents down at the top there. If North America was eroding at this current rate, the scientists actually agree on this. It should have been worn down into the ocean several times in these hundreds of millions of years it's been here, supposedly. The human population is too small, too few human remains. the magnetic field rate of decay. The magnetic field on the Earth protects the Earth in a lot of ways from things coming like solar wind and everything. I was just in the north in Fairbanks, and I saw the northern lights. So beautiful, so amazing. You're never the same after you've seen northern lights. Anyway, what causes that? Wave energy from the sun. When the sun comes to the Earth, the north magnetic pole and the south magnetic pole pulls that stuff, that energy, to the poles of the Earth. And that's where they light up the atmosphere. But that protects the Earth from some of that damage. Now that magnetic field, if you turn it backwards, we know it's actually decaying. If you roll time backwards and it's powerful, it's going to burn everything up. And this is one they have not had good answers for. Too much helium in rocks. I'm going to finish with that one. Too much helium in rocks. Okay, remember I talk about decay is going on. Igneous rocks are decaying. No question about it. Creationists have looked at it and they admit there's decay going on in the rocks. But why is there helium still in the rocks? Do you know what helium is? Helium is a little tiny atom, number 2 on the periodic scale. We can't manufacture helium. We can only gather it from places. Helium, have you ever had a helium-filled balloon? Okay, you ever done the breathing? That's fun. Anyway, helium will get, if you have a regular rubber balloon, don't even try it with helium. Helium will go right through the skin of that balloon so fast. You got to use, what is it, Kevlar? What is it called? Mylar. You got to use Mylar. And even Mylar, give it enough time and it'll droop down because helium's getting out. Helium is a tiny, tiny, tiny atom and it'll get out. Now, why is helium a product of decay in igneous rocks? Why is it still in the rocks? Because by now, if it's millions of years old, it should have found its way out of those rocks. And for the longest time, there's been a big question to evolutionists, even by evolutionists. Where's the helium in the atmosphere? There should be more. If the rocks have been millions of years old, should be producing lots of helium. Where is it? Maybe it went off in outer space. It floated off. No. It's still in the rocks. They found out it's still in the rocks. Why is that? Here's the look. It looks like something hit the rocks and caused a rapid amount of decay in a short amount of time. Let me just close with a thought here on what decay is. What does the wrath of God look like? What is the wrath of God against a sinner? Did Jesus experience the wrath of God? Completely? In place of us? Why isn't he burning in hell right now? This is something you can share with your friends. If he really did die the sinner's death, he should be burning in hell right now, if that's what God's intent was to do with a sinner. Okay, but what is the wrath of God? Jesus was connected to the Father closer than any human has ever been connected. He could sense the presence of the Father. He was connected. So when Jesus became sin and he began to experience God's wrath, what was going on? The Father, ever so reluctantly, was doing this. And it killed Jesus. Because the Father saw in Jesus you and me and our sinful natures asking God to leave, and God stepped back. And that's the wrath of God. When God responds to us in the way we've asked him to, we don't want him in our life, he will reluctantly leave. And for Jesus, that was too much. and it killed him. In the bigger scale, when Adam and Eve asked God, in a sense, to don't want you anymore, we're listening to this guy now. This is the boss. The Father reluctantly did what to this world? He stepped back. Now, what did that do to this planet? Gave it a good shove toward chaos. God is a God that organizes and holds things together by his power. When he steps back, things fall apart over time. Are you with me on this? Yes. I think that's what decay is. Take a look at Romans 1. It's a very good description of God's wrath. Paul says this, God's wrath is revealed now among men as he lets them live their lives the way they want to and deal with the consequences of him being away from them. Do you know what I'm talking about? Look at Romans 1. That's the wrath of God being revealed now. You can see it. So what is decay? Decay is very hard to explain scientifically, but it's entropy. It's things going from order to chaos, from warm to cold, or I should say from something to room temperature. Everything is going that way because God has stepped back of this planet. He hasn't completely left us, but my goodness, can we not see the effects of a somewhat godless world? Amen? So what does that look like even in the rocks? If you look at Romans 8, it talks about the whole creation groaning. The whole creation. And first of all, it talks about people. But then he goes, but the whole creation is groaning under the burden of decay, the burden of corruption. And they're waiting, longing for the day that the sons of God will be revealed. In other words, when Jesus comes back. And when we get restored, the planet gets restored with us. But until then, everything is groaning. When we look at decay in the rocks, I look at this theologically. The rocks are groaning. Everything's groaning. All of nature is feeling the step back of God. Now, when sin entered this world, I went to a creation conference where there was this nationally known scientist. I think he was an atomic energy expert, but he was a creationist. And he was talking about the effects of sin and so forth, or I should say decay. He was talking about decay. And I came up to him afterwards. All of us were gathering around him after the break, and before somebody else came up, and you know how that is? You gather around the speaker, and everybody's trying to get a question in. So I'm thinking, okay, get in there, get your question. What's it going to be? Make it a good one. So finally I said, Professor, do you have a theory about what happened to the planet when physically happened, when sin entered? And he brightened up like that was a good question, like, why, yes, I do. And he said, I think something like a shock wave hit nature. And I so wanted to ask him more about that, but we had to split and move. A shock wave that hit the rocks, hit everything. It made everything start to die. And the day you eat of it, dying you shall die. It's a process. It'll start immediately, right? So this whole world is experiencing this. And can I say something that's just really encouraging? Like I do that? You know what aging is? And I'm talking about post-mature, not the Parkers or anybody like that. I'm talking about way after them. What aging is incremental dying. Isn't that encouraging? Aren't you glad you came today? I'm experiencing incremental dying, trust me. God has created us with every system of repair. Everything can be repaired. God has marvelously built all those systems into us. They just can't quite keep up. It's just like something's monkeyed with these systems, and they can't quite keep things going. And so things are slowly breaking down. That's okay. Bring it on. I want my real retirement. Amen? Let's go on to a better place. But meanwhile, the whole creation is groaning, and that's what decay is. And so that's my view on some of these things about the age of rocks. Yeah, I think the rocks have had apparent age hit them because decay hit them, because I think God stepped back from his creation at the request of Adam and Eve, so to speak. Okay? And that's my view. Anybody here have any questions? Yes? Comment.
When you're talking about the age of things, how they trace the carbon dating.
Yes, carbon dating.
I had asked you last night sometime about it, and we're familiar with the creation encounter that's in actually part of it from the Hawkinson Church, like there.
Oh, yes, yes. Hawkinson. Yeah, we had friends over there. Yeah.
And one of the scientists that were actually part of that group, he was an atheist and turned as a believer, a creationist. He did an experiment on that same line.
Mm-hmm.
He had a friend of his who was an Indian, an elderly man, whose wife had recently died.
Okay.
Years prior.
Okay.
Married her.
Okay.
And they were good friends. And what he did, he got permission, and the husband helped him. They dug up her bones.
Okay.
He took those bones and did the same thing what you want to do with your, see how old your stuff is, your volcanic stuff?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And,
The first question that they asked him was the same thing they asked you. Where did you get it?
yeah, yeah.
And he would not answer them.
Yeah, and they
His
suspected
wife
something.
died 2 years prior.
Yeah.
And they were trying to say it was millions of years old, or somewhere in that. Well, where did you get it?
Yeah. No, they've probably been embarrassed by creationists before, and so they're careful. Yeah, yeah, but I mean, they suspected something. Anybody else have a question? Yeah, sir.
Salt up there. On that tour that we took, we went down to the Florida area, and there was always a salt hexagonal.
Yes,
small
yes.
crystals.
Wonderful. Yeah,
And
big
we
crystal.
decided, Elaine Kennedy was going to say, she said somebody would work on it. In other words, did it get ice? Did
Oh,
volcanoes get ice?
oh,
Did it
oh,
get
oh.
water? What did you crystallize it?
My understanding is it's just a very cool process. In other words, slowly cooled into solids.
Slow cooling.
So slow cooling might represent the presence of water. So, you know, a lot of the Columbia River Gorge lava was at the end of the flood, no question about it. So some of the volcanic action tied to the flood, I think. That's me.
Very impressive.
Good, good. And whoops, anybody? I keep doing that, don't I? Anyone else? Sir.
I had a question about the Ice Age.
Yes.
The Bible doesn't mention the Ice Age.
No.
As far-reaching as the Ice Age was supposed to have been, I wonder why that is.
The Ice Age was only in North America, and a little bit of Siberia. And to this day, I'm not sure I've ever heard a good explanation. Remember, they don't know what caused it. And so this is perplexing that Central Europe didn't have it. And to me, it's obvious because the volcanic action was not around there. It was around the Pacific Rim and so on, where the Ice Age did take place. Yes?
Some friends of mine down in Wawa spent some time in the Seychelles Islands
Yes.
as missionaries.
Uh-huh.
Seychelles Islands, they tested all the rocks there. They're identical to rocks up in the Alps. New Zealand.
Oh my, how about that?
And they've been rolled. You know, they haven't just slid. They've been rolled. They're mostly brown rocks
Mm-hmm.
to make up the Seychelles Islands.
Okay. How about
So,
that?
When you said, this just kind of set me off, because when you said that.
I don't want to set you off, sir.
North America experienced glaciers. I always
Yeah.
thought perhaps that was glaciers over there too.
Well, the Missoula flood. Now, just remember this when you're digging up these round rocks in your yard, and you have a few unhappy words to share with your angel about them. They are from the Missoula flood. There's no question. That's what caused them around here. Did I see a hand? Yes.
Ice Age, there was a mini Ice Age back in the early 1800s, like the River Thames in London was so thick with ice that they set up a fair on
Could have been, I suppose. I guess I haven't heard about that. You can have mini ones, but the thing that's, this ice age lasted for centuries. And so, yeah, this is a big one compared. Any other thoughts, questions, comments, criticisms, gripes? Yes.
Speaking of the ice age and the floods, if it's mostly here in northern America, in the continent,
Yes, yes.
how do people survive, or do they just leave and then come back?
Yeah, I think they just left. They moved out of the area or found warmer places. That might be why we got people in South America. Why didn't they stop in beautiful Northwest? It's too cold around here. Maybe it kept them going. Incidentally, what's really interesting is you find all these earliest settlements like Machu Picchu in Peru, all these early Aztec Incas, all these people were very warlike. They're all building battlements and expecting to be attacked and everything, and everybody was afraid in those days. It's just very interesting to me. Yeah, sad kind of. All right, anything else? Well, Pastor, you want to do a drop, what have you got there? Is that everybody?
That was the ones from last night. Right?
From last night? Oh, okay. Wait a minute, let me see what I got. What am I supposed to give him? What should I give him? What do you want?
Your gold nugget.
No way, no way. You're not getting my gold nugget. No, sir.
Whatever you have for me.
How about a nice swimming dinosaur, too?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Great. Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else want one? What else are you going to do? You going to do any others? Come on, come on, come on.
Say amen for Dr. Stan sharing today. Have you been encouraged and blessed? Thank you. You can give him a hand. Appreciate you taking time with us and sharing with us. And maybe I can have a word of prayer with you as
Please
we
do,
end.
please do.
Really
Pray for
appreciate
us.
you sharing your ministry with us.
Oh,
Heavenly Father, please bless Dr. Stan and the people that he shares with and that he could be with us today. May we use this information and knowledge to encourage others and remove little obstacles and barriers in front of people's faith,
yes.
and that we can turn our eyes towards you and be ready for your next moves. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you for inviting me. All right, y'all come on up. You want to look? Or leave. You may leave.